We're finally shutting down her little failure. That's what my brother said out loud in a federal courtroom, confident, smug, already celebrating. My parents sat behind him, nodding like this was justice finally being served. They thought they'd won. What they didn't expect was the moment the judge stopped reading. Her hand froze over the paperwork, her expression changed, and she asked a question that made my brother's smile collapse in real time. Is this the same company that just secured a 9-figure federal contract? My name is Rachel Donovan. If you asked my family to describe me, they wouldn't hesitate, but not in a good way. They'd say I was difficult, stubborn, the one who never listened. They would never use the word successful. Success in my family had a very specific look. It meant polished smiles at charity galas. It meant luxury cars lined up in the driveway. It meant knowing exactly which table you belonged at and never questioning why. My father owned a chain of high-end car dealerships. He believed image was everything and obedience was a form of respect. To him, a good child followed the plan, protected the family name, and never made waves in public. My older brother Mark understood that early. He dressed the part, spoke the language, shook the right hands. He wasn't just the golden heir, he was the future already chosen. My younger sister married into money before she ever needed a career. She floated from fundraiser to fundraiser, smiling for cameras, collecting titles like board member and philanthropist. In my parents' eyes, she had won the game without even playing. And then there was me. I asked questions. I challenged assumptions. I didn't care how things looked if they didn't make sense. I earned a top-tier business degree that instead of sliding into the family empire, I became fascinated by technology, systems, security, the invisible frameworks that actually keep the modern world running. To my family, it was tech nonsense, a phase, a rebellion they assumed I'd outgrow. But I didn't. I refused to stay in my lane because the lane they picked felt like a cage. And from the moment I stepped outside it, I wasn't just different. I was the problem. 8 years ago, I started my cybersecurity company out of a rented garage that barely qualified as an office. The door stuck when it rained, the heater only worked when it felt like it, and most nights, the only sound was my laptop fan fighting to stay alive. I had $4,200 in savings, a folding desk I bought secondhand, and a prototype that crashed more often than it succeeded. But it was mine. When I told my father what I was building, he laughed, actual laughter, the kind that cuts deeper than yelling. "That's not a business, Rachel," he said. "That's a phase. You'll grow out of it." My brother Mark didn't even try to hide his contempt. "Let us know when you want a real job," he smirked, "or when you need help crawling back." That was the moment I stopped explaining myself. I stopped sending updates, stopped sharing milestones, stopped hoping for approval that was never coming. The early years were brutal in ways no one posts about. I worked 18-hour days, sleeping in 3-hour blocks. I pitched to rooms that smiled politely and passed. I signed contracts that fell apart weeks later. I trusted partners who vanished the second things got hard. More than once, I sat on the garage floor at 3 a.m., staring at my bank balance, calculating how many days I had left before everything collapsed. There were moments, real ones, when quitting felt logical, responsible even. But every failure taught me something. Every rejected proposal exposed a weakness. Every breach attempt showed me what the system needed to become. Slowly, the prototype evolved. We built intrusion detection systems for secure communications, software that could recognize threats in real time and shut them down in milliseconds before damage was even registered. Not flashy, not trendy, just effective. By year 4, we landed our first government contract. Small, quiet, but legitimate. By year 6, we were profitable. No debt, no shortcuts. And by year 8, everything changed. Because success didn't arrive with applause. It arrived silently. And the people who doubted me the most were about to learn just how wrong they'd been.
6 weeks before the court hearing, everything I'd been building in silence finally broke through. My company, Sentinel Core Technologies, secured a multi-year federal defense contract worth over $90 million. Not a pitch, not a promise. Signed, sealed, funded. The kind of contract that doesn't just validate your work, it rewrites your future. Industry publications picked it up within days. Quiet at first, then louder. Analysts started calling. Investors who had ignored me for years suddenly wanted meetings. My inbox filled with subject lines that all sounded the same. Let's talk. Inside the company, everything moved fast. We doubled our engineering team, expanded our operations footprint, brought in compliance officers, legal counsel, security staff. The garage was a memory now. And still, my family had no idea. I had built Sentinel Core under my married name. No press photos, no personal interviews, no hometown mentions. I kept my private life sealed behind layers of intention. Not out of fear, out of clarity. Their approval wasn't required anymore. I had proof. I had results. I had independence. Unfortunately, their interference still was, because just as my world finally stabilized, they decided to step back into it. And this time, they weren't asking. The bankruptcy petition arrived without warning. No call, no explanation, just a courier envelope waiting on my desk when I walked in that morning, filed by my own brother. Mark claimed I owed him millions from an early investment he said he'd made when Sentinel Core was just an idea. According to the filing, my company was insolvent, mismanaged, drowning in hidden debt. The language was deliberate, designed to alarm regulators, spook partners, and trigger automatic reviews. Every line was a lie. The signatures were forged. The contracts never existed. The financial statements were fabricated from nothing but imagination and intent. It wasn't sloppy. It was calculated. The goal was never to win the case. The goal was to freeze my assets, stall the federal contract, and plant doubt where certainty mattered most. Defense agencies don't gamble on instability. A single question mark can shut doors that took years to open. And they knew that. This wasn't about money. If it were, they would have asked. This was about control, about rewriting the story before anyone else could hear it. They didn't want a settlement. They wanted proof. Proof that I was reckless, that I'd flown too close to the sun, that their version of me, the irresponsible daughter, the unserious entrepreneur, had been right all along. Because if I failed publicly, they wouldn't have to admit they were wrong, and that was worth destroying me for.
On the morning of the hearing, Mark walked into the courtroom like a man who had already won. His shoulders were loose. His tie was perfectly knotted. He wore the expression of someone expecting applause, not scrutiny. My parents followed close behind him, dressed carefully, muted colors, the kind of outfits chosen to look concerned without looking responsible. They didn't look at me, not once. I sat quietly at the defense table, hands folded, eyes forward. No nerves, no performance, just patience. The judge entered and the room rose. She settled into her seat and began reviewing the petition on her screen. Page 1, page 2. Her expression didn't change until it did. She paused, scrolled back up, typed something, then stopped moving entirely. The silence stretched. She leaned back slightly, then leaned forward again, eyes narrowing, not at me, but at the filing. After a long moment, she pressed a button. "Counsel," she said evenly. "Both of you, approach the bench." Chairs scraped, footsteps echoed, voices dropped into whispers that didn't stay whispers for long. The temperature in the room shifted. Mark's attorney leaned in too quickly. My brother's confidence began to leak out of him, drop by drop. My parents exchanged a look, confusion edging into unease. The judge listened, asked a question, then another. Her pen stopped midair. Finally, she straightened and looked up, this time directly into the courtroom. "Is this the same Sentinel Core Technologies?" she asked, voice clear and controlled. "That was recently awarded a federal cybersecurity contract." No one answered. Not Mark, not his attorney, not my parents. The silence was no longer comfortable. The judge continued. "Because if it is," she said, "I will require extensive documentation immediately." She paused, just long enough for the weight of her next words to land. "Either this petition is wildly incompetent," her gaze hardened, "or someone in this courtroom is committing thought." The room didn't breathe. And for the first time that morning, Mark looked at me. We didn't argue. We presented. Audited financial statements, signed, sealed, verified. Federal contract confirmations, dated, numbered, undeniable. Forensic analyses showing the so-called evidence had been created days before the filing, metadata intact, timelines unbroken. No theatrics, no speeches, just facts. The judge took her time. She read every page, compared signatures line by line, cross-referenced dates, paused to review system logs and forensic timestamps. The courtroom waited. No one interrupted her. No one dared. Mark shifted in his seat.
Once, twice. Confidence had fully drained from his posture now, replaced with something thinner, smaller. Finally, the judge set the file down. She didn't sigh, didn't shake her head. She simply spoke. This court finds no basis for this petition. Her voice was calm, clinical. The case is dismissed in its entirety. A beat. Then she continued, and this matter is hereby referred to the appropriate federal authorities for investigation of potential fraud. The word hung in the air. Fraud. She looked directly at my brother. Not through him, at him. Sabotaging a government contractor is not a family dispute, she said evenly. It is a criminal offense. Mark opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The gavel came down. Once. And just like that, the lie collapsed under its own weight. My brother lost everything. His position, his reputation, his freedom. My parents tried to explain, tried to justify. I didn't argue. I simply said, family doesn't try to destroy you to feel right. And I walked away. Today, my company employs over 150 people. We protect systems that protect lives. I built a home far from the people who needed me to fail. And last year, I had a daughter. She will never grow up believing love is conditional. They dragged me into court to prove I was a failure. Instead, they exposed themselves. The judge recognized my company's name because we built something worth recognizing. And that day, I learned something powerful. The most dangerous thing you can do to people who doubt you is succeed quietly.